The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Julia's law office as she stared at the contract before her, realizing with a sinking feeling that the signature at the bottom belonged to Warren Harrison, the only man she had ever truly loved, and the same man whose heart she had shattered 8 years ago, when she walked away to pursue her legal career instead of following him to New York. Julia Ortiz had built her reputation as one of Chicago's most formidable corporate attorneys, working 16-hour days and sacrificing everything personal for professional success. At 30, she had made partner at Morrison & Associates, owned a sleek downtown condo, and commanded respect in every boardroom she entered. What she did not have was the warmth of someone waiting for her at home, the sound of laughter over morning coffee, or the touch of hands that knew every scar on her heart. She had convinced herself those things did not matter, that ambition was enough to fill the hollow spaces inside her chest. The contract in front of her represented a massive merger between Harrison Industries and a European manufacturing conglomerate. Warren had built an empire from nothing, turning a small investment firm into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that dominated 3 continents. The business world called him a genius, a visionary who could spot opportunities where others saw only risk. Julia knew him as the boy who used to bring her coffee during late-night study sessions, who held her when her father died, who asked her to choose him and got his answer in the form of her packed bags and a plane ticket to law school. Her phone buzzed with a message from her assistant. "Mr. Harrison will be here in 10 minutes for the contract review meeting. Conference room is ready." Julia's hands trembled slightly as she gathered her files. She had known this moment would come eventually. Chicago was a big city, but the corporate world was surprisingly small. She had heard about his success through the years, seen his face in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, and felt a twist in her stomach every single time. He had moved on, of course. The tabloids linked him to models and heiresses, women who looked nothing like the girl he had loved in college. She told herself she was happy for him, that she had made the right choice. The lie tasted bitter even after 8 years of practice. She walked to the conference room with her shoulders back and her expression carefully neutral. 3 of her colleagues were already seated, shuffling papers and checking their phones. Julia took her place at the head of the table, positioning herself where she could control the room and maintain professional distance. She was good at this, at compartmentalizing, at pretending her heart was not racing like a trapped bird against her ribs. The door opened, and Warren Harrison walked in, and Julia forgot how to breathe. He was taller than she remembered, broader through the shoulders, with the kind of presence that made everyone else in the room fade into background noise. His dark hair was shorter now, professionally styled instead of the messy curls she used to run her fingers through. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. And his eyes, those impossible blue eyes that used to look at her like she was the answer to every question, swept across the room and landed on her with the force of a physical blow. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with everything unsaid, 8 years of silence and regret and what-ifs piling up like snow in a storm. Then Warren's expression smoothed into professional courtesy, and he extended his hand across the table. "Miss Ortiz, I have heard excellent things about your work." His voice was deeper, rougher, with an edge that had not been there before. Julia stood and shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, and hating how much she wanted to hold on. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for choosing our firm to represent you in this merger." They sat down, and Julia launched into her presentation with the same confidence she brought to every client meeting. She explained the terms, highlighted potential issues, and outlined their strategy for negotiations. Warren listened intently, asking sharp questions that proved he had read every word of the 100-page document. His business acumen was impressive, but Julia had always known he was brilliant. That had never been the problem. The problem was that she could feel his eyes on her even when she was not looking at him, could sense the weight of his attention like a hand against her spine. The problem was that her carefully constructed walls were cracking, and she was terrified of what would happen if they came down completely. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When it finally ended, Julia's colleagues filed out, leaving her to gather her materials. She was hyper-aware of Warren still sitting across from table, watching her with an expression she could not read. "You did well for yourself," he said quietly. "Partner at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. Youngest in the company's history, from what I understand." Julia looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "I worked hard. You always did." There was something in his voice, not quite bitterness but close. "Nothing could stand in your way once you set your mind to something." The accusation hung between them, unspoken but clear. Julia felt her defenses snap into place. "We were 22 years old, Warren. We were kids who did not know what we wanted. I knew exactly what I wanted." He stood, buttoning his jacket with deliberate movements. "I wanted you. I wanted us to build a life together. But you made your choice, and clearly it was the right one. Look at everything you have accomplished. You are not being fair." "Fair?" Warren laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You are right. It is not fair to bring up ancient history. We are professionals now. Let us keep this strictly business." He walked toward the door, and Julia felt panic flare in her chest. She did not know what she wanted from him, did not know if she had any right to want anything at all, but she could not let him leave like this. "Warren, wait." He stopped, his hand on the door handle, but did not turn around. "I am sorry," Julia said, and the words felt inadequate, too small to carry the weight of what she needed to say. "I know I hurt you. I know I made a choice that broke both of us, but I thought I was doing the right thing. We had different paths, different dreams." Warren turned slowly, and the look on his face made her heart ache. "The only dream I ever had was you, Julia. Everything else was just details." Then he was gone, and Julia was alone in the conference room with the rain still pounding against the windows and tears burning behind her eyes that she refused to let fall. The next 2 weeks were torture. Warren came to the office 3 more times for meetings, and each encounter was professionally cordial and personally devastating. They discussed contracts and negotiation strategies, and never once mentioned the elephant in the room. Julia went home each night and poured herself into case files, trying to drown out the memory of his voice saying she had been his only dream. She told herself it did not matter. They were different people now, living different lives. The fact that she still reached for her phone sometimes, wanting to call him, wanting to hear about his day, was just a remnant of old habits. The fact that she could still remember exactly how he tasted, how his hands felt tangled in her hair, how he laughed when she told terrible jokes, was meaningless. Her best friend Olivia did not buy it for a second. "You are miserable," Olivia announced, showing up at Julia's condo on a Friday night with Thai food and wine. "You have been miserable since the Harrison contract landed on your desk. Talk to him." "There is nothing to talk about," Julia insisted, stabbing at her pad thai with more force than necessary. "It was 8 years ago. We have both moved on." "Have you? Because from where I am sitting, you look like someone who is still in love with the man she walked away from." Julia set down her fork, her appetite disappearing. "It does not matter if I am or not. You did not see the way he looked at me, Liv. I destroyed him. He is not going to forgive me just because I suddenly realized I made a mistake." "Did you make a mistake?" The question hung in the air. Julia thought about her corner office, her impressive client list, her reputation as a legal shark who never lost. She thought about her empty apartment, her silent phone, the way she sometimes woke up reaching for someone who was not there. "I do not know," she whispered. "I thought I was choosing my future, building something important, but sometimes I wonder if I just chose fear over love." Olivia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then maybe it is time to be brave." The opportunity came sooner than Julia expected. The merger hit a snag when the European company tried to change terms at the last minute, and Warren needed round-the-clock legal support to navigate the complications. Julia volunteered to handle it personally, telling herself it was for the firm's reputation, and not because she wanted any excuse to spend more time near him. They ended up working late one Thursday night, just the two of them in the conference room with Chinese takeout and a mountain of paperwork. Warren had shed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that made Julia's mouth go dry. She forced herself to focus on the contracts, on finding loopholes and crafting solutions, but her awareness of him was a constant distraction. "Remember when we studied for finals like this?" Warren said suddenly, breaking hours of focused silence. "You would get so intense, highlighting everything in sight until your textbooks looked like rainbows." Julia felt a reluctant smile tug at her lips. "You would always fall asleep on my shoulder around 2 in the morning. I used to draw mustaches on you with marker." "I know, I saw the pictures." His expression softened. "I kept them, actually, in a box somewhere, could not bring myself to throw them away." The admission cracked something open inside Julia's chest. "Warren, I know we are supposed to keep this professional," he said, setting down his pen and looking at her directly. "I know I am supposed to pretend you are just another attorney, just another business associate. But I can't, Julia. Being near you after all these years, it is killing me. Because you look exactly the same but different, more polished, more guarded. And I want to know everything that happened in the years between then and now. I want to know if you are happy, if you have someone, if you ever think about me the way I have thought about you every single day for 8 years. Julia's breath caught. "You thought about me?" "Every day," he repeated. "Even when I was trying not to. Even when I was angry and hurt and convinced I hated you. Even when I was with other people who were not you and never could be." He stood, moving around the table until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gray at his temples. "I built an empire, Julia. I made more money than I know what to do with. I have everything I am supposed to want, and none of it matters because the only thing I ever really wanted was you." Julia stood on shaking legs, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I chose wrong," she whispered. "I thought I needed to prove something, to make something of myself before I could be worthy of being loved. And by the time I realized how stupid that was, how much I had given up, it was too late. You were gone. You had moved on. And I had to live with the fact that I had destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." Warren reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. "It is not too late. How can you say that, after what I did to you? Because I never stopped loving you." His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Julia felt tears spill over. "I tried. God knows I tried. But you are in everything I do, every decision I make. I built this company thinking maybe if I was successful enough, important enough, you would see what you gave up and regret it. And then when I finally saw you again, looking at me like I was just another client, I wanted to hate you. But I could not. Because you are still the woman I fell in love with, the brilliant, driven, beautiful woman who made me want to be better." Warren. His name was a prayer, a plea, an apology, all wrapped into one syllable. He kissed her, and it was like coming home after a long exile. Julia melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, 8 years of longing and regret and desperate love pouring into the kiss. He tasted like memory and promise, like everything she had given up and everything she could have if she was brave enough to reach for it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Warren rested his forehead against hers. "I am terrified," Julia admitted. "What if I mess this up again? What if I am not good at this, at letting someone in? Then we will figure it out together." He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "I am not asking you to give up your career, Julia. I would never ask that. I am asking you to let me be part of your life. To stop running from the one thing that actually matters." Julia thought about her empty condo, her solitary dinners, the way success had started to taste like ashes in her mouth. She thought about Warren, who had spent 8 years building an empire and thinking about her. She thought about being brave. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes, I want this. I want you." The smile that broke across Warren's face was like sunrise after a long night. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring, and Julia let herself fall into it, let herself believe that maybe second chances were real. They finished the contract work around midnight, sitting closer than was strictly professional, their hands finding each other between clauses and legal jargon. Warren drove her home, and Julia invited him up for coffee, which they both knew was not about caffeine. They sat on her couch talking until dawn, filling in the gaps of 8 years, sharing stories and dreams and fears. "I dated," Warren told her, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Tried to find someone who could make me forget you. But every woman I met, I would compare her to you and she would always come up short. It was not fair to them. I knew I had to stop, had to move on, but I did not know how." "I did the same thing," Julia admitted. "I went on dates, tried to feel something, anything, but it was like I was frozen. Like the part of me that could love died when I walked away from you." She tilted her head up to look at him. "I convinced myself I was better off alone, that I did not need anyone, but the truth is I was just scared. Scared that if I let myself love someone again, I would have to acknowledge what I gave up." Warren kissed the top of her head. "We were young, we made mistakes, but we have a chance now to do it right." "What does that look like?" Julia asked. "You are based in New York, I am here in Chicago. My partnership, my whole career is here." "I have been thinking about opening a Chicago office," Warren said. "Harrison Industries has been expanding and it makes sense to have a base in the Midwest. I could relocate here, be closer to you." Julia sat up, staring at him. "You would move here?" "For me, I would move anywhere for you," Warren said simply. "I spent 8 years without you. I am not wasting another day." The next few months were a whirlwind. Warren did open a Chicago office, leasing a full floor in one of the premier downtown buildings. Julia helped him navigate the legal requirements, and they fell into a routine of morning coffee runs, lunch meetings that were more about being together than actual business, and evenings at one of their apartments, learning each other all over again. They kept the relationship private at first, knowing that office gossip could be vicious and Julia's position as Warren's attorney complicated things. But it was getting harder to hide the way they looked at each other, the way Warren's hand would find the small of her back when he thought no one was watching, the way Julia's face lit up whenever he walked into a room. Morrison, the senior partner at her firm, called her into his office one afternoon with an expression that made Julia's stomach drop. "I am going to cut to the chase," Morrison said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Are you involved with Warren Harrison?" Julia considered lying, but Morrison had not gotten to where he was by being foolish. "Yes, we are together." "I see." Morrison steepled his fingers. "You understand this creates a conflict of interest. You cannot continue to represent him legally if you are romantically involved." "I know." Julia had been dreading this conversation, knowing it was inevitable. I can transfer his account to another partner, make sure everything is handled appropriately. Or, Morrison said slowly, you could leave the firm. Julia's heart stopped. What? You are an exceptional attorney, Julia. One of the best I have seen in my 40 years practicing law. But I watch you in meetings, see the way you work yourself to exhaustion, and I wonder if you are doing this because you love it or because you are running from something. Morrison leaned forward. That man is in love with you. More than that, you are in love with him. And I have been in this business long enough to know that chances like that do not come around twice. You are telling me to quit. I am telling you to think about what you really want. You can keep climbing the ladder here, make managing partner in a few years, retire wealthy and accomplished and alone. Or you can take a risk on something that might matter more. Morrison smiled. Besides, if you did decide to go into private practice, I suspect Harrison Industries would be an excellent first client. And I might know a few other CEOs who could use a brilliant attorney who is not afraid to tell them when they are being idiots. Julia walked out of Morrison's office in a daze. The idea of leaving the firm, of giving up the partnership she had worked so hard for, should have terrified her. But instead, she felt something that might have been relief. She thought about the long hours, the cases that left her feeling empty, the way she had sacrificed everything for a career that was supposed to fulfill her, but never quite did. She thought about Warren, who had reorganized his entire life to be near her, who looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world. That evening, she met him at his new penthouse apartment, which had stunning views of Lake Michigan and very little furniture because Warren had been too busy to actually decorate. He greeted her at the door with a kiss that made her forget her own name, and she melted into him, letting the stress of the day fade. I need to talk to you about something, Julia said when they finally broke apart. Warren's expression turned serious. That sounds ominous. Morrison knows about us, which means I can't keep representing you as your attorney. There is a conflict of interest. I figured that was coming. Warren led her to the couch, pulling her down beside him. We will transfer everything to another lawyer at the firm. It is not ideal, but it is manageable. Or I could leave the firm entirely, Julia said, and watched Warren's eyes widen. Morrison suggested I go into private practice, focus on corporate law for select clients, build something on my own terms instead of following someone else's rules. Julia, I do not want you to give up your career for me, not again, not after everything. I would not be giving it up, she insisted. I would be changing it, making it something that actually fits my life instead of consuming it. I love being an attorney, Warren. I love the challenge, the strategy, the wins, but I hate what it has cost me. And I think there might be a way to have both, to have the career I love and the man I love, if I am willing to take a risk. Warren pulled her close, kissing her temple. If this is what you want, really want, then I support you completely. I will even be your first client. I will pay you an obnoxious retainer. Julia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. You are going to be my most difficult client. Absolutely. I will call you at all hours, make unreasonable demands, insist on working dinners. His hand traced patterns on her back. And then I will take you home and show you exactly how much I appreciate your excellent legal advice. That sounds like a conflict of interest. Probably. Good thing you are your own boss now. Julia gave her notice the next day. The partners were disappointed but understanding, and several of them privately congratulated her on choosing happiness over prestige. Her colleagues threw her a going-away party, and Morrison pulled her aside to tell her she was making the right choice, that he had watched too many talented lawyers sacrifice everything for a job that would replace them in a heartbeat. Setting up her own practice was terrifying and exhilarating. Warren helped her find office space, a small but elegant suite in a building near his. He also connected her with several CEOs in his network who needed legal representation, and within 2 months, Julia had more clients than she could handle. She hired an assistant, then an associate, building something that was entirely hers. The best part was the balance. She worked hard, but she was also home for dinner most nights. She took weekends off. She had time to go for runs along the lake, to meet Olivia for coffee, to spend long Sunday mornings in bed with Warren, talking and laughing and making love like they had all the time in the world. Warren was everything she remembered and more. He was attentive and passionate, bringing her flowers for no reason, leaving notes in her briefcase, planning surprise weekend trips to places she had always wanted to visit. But he also gave her space, understood when she needed to work, never made her feel guilty for the demands of her career. He had built his empire and knew what it took to be successful. They supported each other, celebrated each other's wins, and consoled each other after rough days. 6 months into their relationship, Warren took her back to their college campus. They walked through the quad where they used to study, past the coffee shop where they had their first date, to the bench where he had asked her to come to New York with him all those years ago. "I have thought about that day so many times," Warren said, sitting beside her on the same weathered bench. "Wondered what would have happened if you said yes, if we had gone to New York together. Would we have made it? Or would we have crashed and burned, too young and too naive to handle the pressure?" "I do not know," Julia admitted. "Maybe we needed the time apart. Maybe we needed to become who we are now before we could really work. Maybe." Warren reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Or maybe I should have done this 8 years ago, but I was too scared you would say no." Julia's heart stopped as Warren slid off the bench onto one knee. "Julia Ortiz, you are the most brilliant, stubborn, beautiful woman I have ever known. You broke my heart once and I spent years trying to put it back together. But the truth is, it was always yours. Every piece, every beat, every moment. I do not want to spend another day without you. I want morning coffee and late-night case reviews and lazy Sundays for the rest of my life. I want to build something together, not just businesses but a family, a home, a future. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the sunlight. Julia looked at it, then at Warren's face, at the hope and love and vulnerability in his eyes, and she started to cry. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." Warren slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her while a group of passing students cheered and applauded. Julia had never been the kind of woman who dreamed about weddings and proposals, but this, right here, felt perfect. It felt like coming full circle, like taking the broken pieces of their past and forging them into something beautiful. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony on the shores of Lake Michigan, surrounded by close friends and family. Julia wore a simple white dress that made Warren's breath catch when she walked down the aisle. He wore a navy suit and cried when he said his vows, promising to love her through every challenge, to support her dreams, to never let her forget how extraordinary she was. Julia promised to choose him every day, to be brave enough to let him in, to build a life together that honored both their ambitions and their love. The reception was in a restored boathouse with views of the water and the city skyline. They danced until midnight, and Warren whispered in her ear that he was the luckiest man alive. Julia held him tight and believed it was true, that somehow they had found their way back to each other against all odds. They bought a house in Lincoln Park, a gorgeous brownstone with a garden and enough space for home offices for both of them. Julia's practice continued to grow, and she brought on 2 more associates, building a boutique firm that specialized in corporate mergers and complex negotiations. Warren's Chicago office expanded, and he split his time between there and New York, but he always made sure to be home for dinner, to prioritize their relationship over even the most lucrative deal. A year into their marriage, Julia found out she was pregnant. She told Warren over breakfast on a Saturday morning, sliding the positive test across the table with shaking hands. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," Julia confirmed, and Warren was around the table in seconds, pulling her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you so much," he said fiercely. "You and this baby, this life we are building, it is everything." Pregnancy was not easy for Julia. She had severe morning sickness for the first trimester and struggled to balance her caseload with her body's demands. But Warren was there for every doctor's appointment, every midnight craving, every moment of fear and excitement. He rubbed her feet when they swelled, brought her ginger tea when she was nauseous, and talked to her growing belly about quarterly reports and market trends, until Julia laughed and told him their baby was going to come out demanding a business plan. Their daughter was born on a snowy February morning, screaming her way into the world with a full head of dark hair and her father's blue eyes. Warren cut the cord with tears streaming down his face, and when the nurse placed the baby in Julia's arms, the world stopped. "She is perfect," Julia whispered, exhausted and overwhelmed and more in love than she knew was possible. "She is ours," Warren said, kissing his wife's forehead, then his daughter's. "Our little miracle." They named her Elizabeth Rose after both their mothers. Beth was a handful from day one, demanding and spirited and so smart it was almost alarming. She had Julia's determination and Warren's charm, and she had both her parents completely wrapped around her tiny fingers. Julia took 3 months of maternity leave, working part-time from home and discovering that while she loved her career, being a mother was something entirely different. It was harder and messier and more terrifying than any courtroom battle, but it was also the most rewarding thing she had ever done. Warren was a natural father, getting up for midnight feedings, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floors with Beth when she was colicky, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. They figured out the balance together, hiring a nanny to help during work hours but making sure they were present for the important moments. First smiles, first words, first steps. They took Beth to the office sometimes, and she became the unofficial mascot of both Harrison Industries and Ortiz Law, charming everyone she met. 2 years later, they had a son. James Warren came into the world much more peacefully than his sister, a calm and observant baby who seemed content to watch the chaos around him. Beth was instantly smitten, insisting on helping with everything and declaring herself the best big sister in the world. Life was full and loud and occasionally overwhelming, but Julia had never been happier. She had the career she loved, the family she adored, and the man who had waited 8 years for her to realize what really mattered. Warren still brought her coffee every morning, still left notes in her briefcase, still looked at her like she was the answer to every question. They still had date nights, stolen moments away from the kids where they remembered who they were before they became parents. They traveled, they laughed, they fought sometimes about whose turn it was to handle bath time or who forgot to buy milk, but they always came back to each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren took Julia back to the college campus where he had proposed. The bench was still there, more weathered now, covered in carved initials and declarations of love. Beth and James were with Warren's parents for the weekend, giving them rare time alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Warren asked, sitting beside her on the bench. "Walking away that first time? Missing out on 8 years we could have had together?" Julia thought about it, really thought about it. She thought about the career she had built, the confidence she had gained, the woman she had become in those years alone. She thought about Warren, who had built an empire and learned what he was capable of. She thought about the second chance that might not have meant as much if they had not lost each other first. "No," she said honestly. "I regret hurting you. I regret the pain we both went through. But I think we needed that time. We needed to become who we were meant to be before we could build this life together. If we had stayed together at 22, young and uncertain and still figuring out who we were, would we have made it? I do not know. But I know who we are now, and I know that every day I choose you and you choose me, and that is worth more than anything." Warren pulled her close, kissing her softly. "I choose you every day for the rest of my life." "That is the plan," Julia said, smiling against his lips. They sat on the bench as the sun set, Warren's arm around her shoulders, Julia's head on his chest, and talked about the future. About Beth starting kindergarten, about James taking his first swimming lessons, about the cases Julia was excited about Warren's plans to expand into Asia. They talked about maybe having another baby, about buying a vacation home, about all the years stretching ahead of them. The college kids walking past probably saw just another middle-aged couple, comfortable and content. They did not know the story, the heartbreak and separation and desperate second chance. They did not know that the man in the expensive suit was a billionaire who would give it all up in a heartbeat for the woman beside him. They did not know that the woman in the designer dress had once walked away from love because she was too scared to believe she deserved it, but Julia and Warren knew. They carried that story with them, let it inform every decision, every choice, every moment. It made them grateful, made them careful with each other's hearts, made them never take for granted the life they had built. Years passed. Beth grew into a whip-smart teenager who wanted to be either a lawyer or a CEO, and could not understand why she could not be both. James became a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved books and soccer, and insisted on adopting every stray cat he found. Julia's firm became one of the most respected boutique practices in Chicago. Warren's company continued to expand, making him one of the wealthiest men in the country, but he never forgot what mattered most. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Warren planned an elaborate surprise. He told Julia they were going to dinner, but instead he drove her to a private airfield where a plane was waiting. They flew to Paris, the city Julia had always dreamed of visiting but never found time for. They spent a week eating pastries and visiting museums and walking along the Seine at night, holding hands like newlyweds. On their last evening, they had dinner on a restaurant terrace overlooking the Eiffel Tower. Warren reached across the table and took her hand. 20 years ago, I stood on a bench and asked you to marry me, he said. And you said yes, even though I had already failed you once, even though you had every reason not to trust me with your heart again. You took a chance on us, on me, and you gave me a life I did not know was possible. Warren, Julia's eyes filled with tears. Let me finish, he said gently. I want you to know that every single day of the last 20 years has been a gift. Watching you build your practice, become a mother, grow into this incredible woman who inspires everyone she meets. I am so proud of you, Julia, so grateful that you chose me, that you keep choosing me. I will always choose you, Julia said. You are the best decision I ever made. They kissed as the Eiffel Tower lit up behind them, and Julia thought about the girl she had been in college, so scared of needing someone, so determined to prove she could make it alone. She thought about how wrong she had been, how love did not make you weak but strong, how the right person lifted you up instead of holding you back. Warren had given her everything: partnership, passion, family, and a love that had survived time and distance and her own foolish mistakes. She had given him the same, and together they had built something that would last. When they returned home, Beth and James were waiting at the airport with handmade signs and enough enthusiasm to embarrass any normal parents. Julia hugged them tight, breathing in the scent of her daughter's shampoo and her son's laundry detergent, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what mattered. Not the cases won or the money made or the reputation earned. This, right here, her family piling into the car, arguing about where to stop for ice cream, Warren's hand finding hers in the front seat, the easy comfort of being loved and known. This was the dream she had been too scared to want 28 years ago, when she walked away from a boy who offered her his whole heart. Thank God she had been brave enough to take it when he offered again. Thank God for second chances and stubborn love and men who waited 8 years because they just knew, that some people were worth everything. Julia Ortiz had built an impressive career and a beautiful family and a life that fulfilled her in every way. But her greatest accomplishment, the thing she was most proud of, was choosing Warren Harrison. Every single day, for the rest of her life. And Warren, who had built empires and made billions and conquered markets around the world, knew that his greatest success was not any of those things. It was winning back the woman who broke his heart, proving to her that love was not a weakness but a strength, and building a family that was worth more than all the money in the world. They had started as kids who did not know better, became adults who had to learn the hard way, and ended as partners who understood that the greatest adventure was not building a career or making a fortune, but finding someone who made you want to be better and choosing them, every day, through every challenge, for all the years of your life. That was the real success story. That was what mattered in the end. Not the offices or the accolades or the headlines, but the quiet moments, the inside jokes, the hands held across the table, the family built from scratch and love that refused to die even when it should have. Julia and Warren Harrison had earned their happy ending, and they treasured it every single day.